I believe we should give the people who create and do it at a high level really well their flowers while they are still alive. Unfortunately, sometimes that does not happen. And I think you saw the title, so you know what it's about. I think Jack Kirby did get his flowers, but I don't think he got his flowers enough from Marvel, in my humble opinion. So when I came across this article today about Jack Kirby, I have not read it in advance, no idea what it's going to say. I like, kind of getting live reaction and commentary. Well, not live, but real life reaction and commentary on these articles when I see them. So again, saw this article, never been to this website before, but I said, you know what? Let's check this article out. And the title is KirbyVision documentary places Marvel's Jack Kirby in pop culture pantheon. And this is an article written by Jim Dandino on Den of Geek, denofgeek.com. Look, the title speaks for itself. Does he belong here? Absolutely. I believe this unequivocally. So let's see what the article has to say. Jack Kirby's influence on comics culture is undeniable. It is not an understatement to say that he is responsible for much, if not all, of the comics language we read when we look at superhero comics. Even now, 30 years after he passed, we still fawn over his creations, whether it's when his characters hit the big screen as the Fantastic Four, or when a new story with his characters are stocked in comic book shops, as with Ram V and Evan Cagle's brilliant New Gods comic. Man, couldn't get those words out. But a new documentary announced this week seeks to place him alongside titans of art and pop culture from the 20th century. Look, this goes without saying. And this is why I said I think sometimes a lot of these gentlemen really should get their flowers while they are still alive. When we still have them here to let them know what they mean to us, what they, how what they have done inspired us, we should definitely, let them know that. And I don't, like I said, I don't think he got all of the flowers he deserved. Monumental. Much of what we see in comic books, you know how you look at one person and you think to yourself, where would this medium be without this one person? Like, if there was no Jack Kirby, now the argument could be made, someone else would have risen and would have been in his place. But really and truly, without his influence at Marvel in those early years, what would Marvel have turned into? I think it would be vastly different. Would comic books even be as popular as they are now? When a person can legitimately be in that argument right there, when you can say, would comic books be as popular as they are without Jack Kirby? That's saying something. Some might disagree, but I think that's an argument that can be made. Ricky Stern, the Emmy-nominated director of documentaries like Joan Rivers, A Piece of Work, and Reversing Roe, will direct KirbyVision. Jack was not only one of the great comic book artists of all time, but a true visionary genius, Stern said in a statement. In this new feature-length documentary, we actively campaign for the recognition he finally deserves as a leading artist and storyteller of the 20th century. This is good. I think not a lot of focus is given to artists and creators. That's why I've tried to, and I know I've stuck to, certain groups of names, and I'm trying to branch out, read some more books from some different people to kind of gauge what I think, if I think these people really stand up, and whether their work holds up to be heralded as some of the greatest works of today, because These people need to be recognized. I think more people in the geek space, or the more people in the geek space that give credence or give their I don't want to say stamp of approval, but if we speak loud enough, the industry will get it. Like, yo, we want to hear from this dude right here. This dude right here. Him? Yeah, more of him. These people can be celebrated. I wish Jack Kirby were here today and could see, not only see the effect of his creations, but get the accolades he deserves for those creations. So I'm glad they're doing this documentary. I hope it is done well. The film has backing from Dan Braun, and Josh Braun from Submarine Entertainment, producers of two of the nominees for Best Documentary at the Oscars, and more importantly, has the support of Kirby Estate behind it, leading prestige and authority to the production. It also, in the interest of full disclosure, has Den of Geek Chief Creative Officer Chris Longo and former Den of Geek editor and chief Mike Chechny on board producing. Yeah, and I'm sure some of you have probably heard of Den of Geek before. Maybe it's really popular, but I don't know much about it. So this is my first foray looking at this news site. But I tried to branch out, getting some of these stories and seeing what's going on. If I'm able to editorialize a bit, it is about time. When you think about the titans of comics industry, even if you include writers, it's hard to think of anyone whose impact inside comics matches Kirby. And it's impossible to come up with a name that matches him outside comics. I gotta say, I agree with your editorializing here. There's a titan. Why this didn't happen sooner? It could be a number of reasons. I think things get muddy when you get into estates and families and what's allowed and what's not allowed, and I understand that. But Kirby definitely a titan in the comic book industry. Kirby was so creative that the comics page literally could not contain it. He wrote and drew the most popular books in the medium at a time when the art form was at its peak, the kind of work that fine art scholars went back and studied for years. The mixed media pages in this in his fourth world books are staggering, hypnotic, and disturbing, and clearly the product of someone who sees a whole different world when he looks at a blank sheet of Bristol board. And look, especially for dudes that draw at a high level, this is a skill that, unless you have ever endeavored to pick up a pencil and put it to a piece of paper and take something from your mind to that piece of paper and make it look dope, if you've never done that, you don't understand the level of skill it takes to do that repeatedly over and over again. I have an immense respect for good artists. At the same time, there's more to Kirby than just his contributions to the art world. The best biographies are always about something other than the subject. Kirby's story is about a man with boundless creativity who defined an artistic medium, but it is also the story of America's shift to global power and the development of the middle class. Kirby was born dirt poor and drew his way out of poverty. He was so passionate about the ideals of his country that he co-created the avatar of what could be at its best, and then lived that at both ends of his career. First as a scout in Europe in World War II, sneaking behind enemy lines and drawing recon maps, and later lending lending old concept art to the CIA to get Americans out of Iran during the hostage crisis. I did not know that. He created a whole mythology that reflected the best American ideals, standing up for people who need help, stories that were explicitly anti fascist and anti war in a medium that was cheap and easy to share with the world, projecting those values to kids around the world. At a time when we are retreating from our responsibilities and violating those ideals, a story like this is critical to show us the way back. And I don't know, much about what he believed, on a lot of those issues, but what I wanted to primarily focus on is the man was a titan in comic books. That goes without saying. This is an old article, was written March 6th, but when I saw it, I was like, oh man, I need to read about this. So I don't know if the documentary came out already. I haven't seen it. Maybe it's still in production. I'll probably look it up after this, but I really wanted to just dive into this article because, like I said, I believe Kirby didn't get the respect that he was due. And unfortunately, some of these comic book companies during the lifespan of some of their creators, the creators really don't get their just due. One of the people I found out about that didn't really get his just due, and this is from Disney, was Carl Barks, who is largely responsible for DuckTales. And when I learned about him, I did a whole a video about him, narrative video about him. Man, this was an interesting guy that provided the stories that were really the lifeblood of my childhood, like DuckTales. Man, that was such a huge deal. But, he didn't necessarily get the respect from the Disney company that he should have, because what he gave to them, man, a lot of this stuff is priceless. And when you find a good writer, a good artist that really does their job, what they offer to these companies, man, it almost can't be measured financially.